I started out in the United States Army, Military Police Academy, a military police patrolman and investigator. Served both over here in the United States and in South Korea. And I began my education, I guess, in the criminal use of the knife. Then I became a police officer in Texas and retired from there after 20 years. 15 of those years, I was a detective. So I was able to amass quite a bit of information on knife attacks and assaults, and all through that time I was in the martial arts, and I was sort of very frustrated and critical of how that training didn't fit with what I really saw was happening. So I decided to create and research this hybrid system that incorporates both the military, the police, and the martial artist. It's important for everyone to know how to defend themselves against a knife and to use a knife. 6 or 7 out of every 10 knives sold in the United States are combat folders. They're easily carried by people. They're found everywhere. Janitors from CEOs can be found carrying these clip-on folding and pocket knives with them. Not only that, but knives are everywhere. You walk into a restaurant, there's knives. In homes, there's knives. Criminals use knives to attack you. The knives that you have in your kitchen are commonly used by criminals to attack the inhabitants of a house. Knives are just everywhere. Knives are on airplanes. They don't let you carry one on, but then they give you one to cut the food when you get on the plane. And so it's an important, realistic, everyday weapon. And we need to be familiar with them, how to use them, and how to defend against them. Biggest questions is, what type of knife should I get? And then, where am I going to carry it? And there's an equation to the knife selection and carrying process, and it's about accessibility and grip. And what type of grip that you want to hold your knife with? There is basically a saber grip, and then there's a reverse grip. Little differences in between these, but these are fundamentally the way. Some people call this ice pick, the different names. Some people call this a sword grip. Many different individual titles for this. But you have to decide where you're going to carry your combat folder, and will that facilitate the type of grip that you want to pull the knife to. And one of the major ways to accomplish this is to find out what you like. Reverse grip has many good strategies with it. Saber grip does too. Reverse grips can be pulled into a concealed position to where the individual that you might be confronting, you'll have the element of surprise because he might not know that you have a knife. Many different things like this. But you're going to have to get one, and you're going to have to, as we like to jokingly say, bond with your knife to feel if you like the saber or reverse grip. After you decide whether you like the reverse or the saber grip, and you're purchasing a combat folder, you've got to decide one more important thing. You have to pick a knife that has the clip on the side where you want it. If you select this side, your strong side or right-handed, and you're pulling this knife out, you want the mechanism that allows you to open the blade to open it in the position that you want, you know. And sometimes you'll buy a knife and you'll get it home and you stick it in your pocket and you wind up quick drawing it to a reverse grip or the sharp end the wrong way. And so these are things, as you're looking for the knife, you need to pick these items out. Some of the finer knives have the clip. And this clip will enable you to unscrew certain ends and screw them into your selection. It's important that you find a knife that allows you to do it on all 4 corners, you know, because sometimes 2 are just not enough. So it's important that you can customize the clip as to where you might want to carry it. There are times that people carry them in different places, and you'll need to even change the clip in that situation. That's an important aspect. Once you've got that customized approach, or find one that's glued to the handle that fits, that suits what you want, that's a great idea. And in summarizing the idea about what the selection of knife is, I have the same feeling as I do about pistols. There's a point of quality that you achieve with a knife or a gun. Past that point of quality, I like all kinds of different knives and guns. the sharp edge cuts, the bullet still travels down the barrel, and you've achieved this. And so, you know, once you get a good quality knife, you can be happy with its performance. And it doesn't have to be any specific one that makes you happy. When people do a quick draw, you know, it's important to understand that the reasons why someone pulls out a knife is going to be to present it, to stop a threat, or they're going to have to draw it to fight. And these techniques go back to the oldest times. If you see a samurai sword, a katana specialist, they draw and slash immediately. If you see a Gurkha, you know, with a kukri knife, the weapon's in the scabbard, they pull it out. They don't usually practice by just pulling it out. They pull it out and slash with it because they're in the heat of combat. So wherever it is that you decide to carry your knife, you have to be able to access it, pull it out, and learn to slash immediately with it. There are primary carry sites, secondary carry sites, and what we'll call tertiary carry sites that are usually not on your body. And the primary carry sites are all about the quick draw, places where you can access the knife real quickly and pull it out. Secondary sites are usually, as some police officers will have it clipped on inside their bulletproof vest in their armpit, or they'll have it up inside their pants on the top of their boot, like a boot knife. Now, these are not quick draw places, but it's better to have a secondary knife than not, just like with a pistol. A lot of the rules of the road with gun carrying apply to these combat folder carryings. But most common, the quick draw primary sights are going to be, you will find, typically clipped to the pant line, you know, and you'll see the telltale clip that should alert you to that fact. They'll be hooked on your belt line. Some people have them in a cross draw over on this side. Some people will go so far as to have them in shoulder holsters. And then your, you know, prepared criminal or operator will have them up in his forearm and in different positions that he's practiced to get knives out quickly. But for the common person, you know, the belt line carry, just much like a pistol, is the pretty typical way to carry a knife. Let me just give you some muscle memory drills that you can do to decide which it is that you like. It's just going to be a couple of X patterns that you can do at home. And then after you do this in the air and do this up against a tree or up against a heavy bag with a dull training knife, you'll decide, do you want to come out in a saber grip or a quick draw out to a reverse grip? I'll show this pattern for you, something you can do to learn what you like. We'll cut a high X. We'll cut a medium or stomach level X. We'll cut a low X, knee high. Much fighting in real world combat is from the knee, as you're falling, trying to get up, and vice versa. And we'll cut a long skinny X right up in front of us. These are also going to develop and train your muscles, not your brain, to react. The only counter that a person has against the element of surprise or an ambush is their reflex, because there's not enough time to react and think. So if you do something 3,000 to 5,000 times, you're starting to train your muscle memory to fight rather than your brain. We can sit here, read this in a book, sit in a chair, figure all this stuff out and say, oh yeah, but your body just won't respond, just like athletics and sports. Let me turn sideways for you and do this. We have a high X, efficient, you see. Window of combat, that rectangle right in front of you, about mid-thigh and about shoulder high. Don't let that blade pass out too far. We're not fighting anybody back here. The bad guy that's trying to kill us is right here. So we have a high X, a medium X, and a low X. We cut up, and then we cut down. Now, so that you can feel if you like the reverse grip or the saber grip, we can cut the same X pattern from a reverse grip. Cut a high X, a medium height X, a low X, cut up, and then cut down, which is a skinny X right up the center line. You should do this right-handed and left-handed. You should cut down and then cut up, you know, and then after you feel that, hit up against hard objects, you'll begin to have an idea of whether you want to quick draw your combat folder into a reverse grip or a saber grip. One way to shorten the quick draw time is opening up the blade about 3/4 of the way as you're getting it into position. It gets halfway, 3/4 of the way, and the attack is imminent. So at this point, you let your first slash pop open that blade as you continue your counter or attack, whatever. And so, you know, front on, you're pulling it out and slashing as you're, you know, attacking. Just remember, you've got to know that your knife will open that way. You can fix and oil and customize the mechanisms to where they'll pop open. But this is a quick way to take out your knife and open it. And in the process of combat, you can get it popped up the same way. Typically from the side, look at the two differences. We pull out the knife, we pull it all the way back, spend this half a second or extra second to open, and then attack. Or you pull out the knife, get it about 3/4 open, and then attack this way. This is a quicker response for your combat folder quick draw. I'm not asking you to be, you know, Wild Bill Hickok and pull out your combat knife in a record speed and pop it open and do stuff. It's good to practice, but in real life, like you'll know of the old gunfighters, they had a steadier, more focused hand than just this rapid quick draw and quick firing. Same thing holds true as you're trying to pull out your knife. I'd like to show you this combat scenario that you can practice that emphasizes the fact that you're under attack, you defend yourself, and then you draw the knife. We'll get Tom out here. Here's just going to be just a lefty high stab. A percentage of our population is left-handed. At 15, 20%. So when all you're practicing, you should do 15 or 20% versus left-handed attacks. And also, you may be left-handed yourself. As he comes in with a high stab, I just slash it. I almost slash my forearm aside to try to block it, and I'm going to try to grab on as now I do my quick draw. From here, I'll deliver a good, viable contact. With any stab, as we'll discuss later, I twist to evacuate the blade, make a more grievous injury, and to aid in my taking the knife out. And so from here, we'll turn around. I'm going to now try to complete this combat scenario as quickly as possible. And so I'm going to drive that knife up, hook the head, slightly using the handle as some type of hook, got a good grip on here, and now turn him down. From here, I capture again, and then finish the enemy. Let's take a look at it from this side. He gives me that high stab, which I wipe away and I try to catch. Here comes this attack right here. Look at the subtleties that are involved with this hook. If you have extra time, hurt him, if you can do it. Spin him down, catch, and then kill. I oftentimes switch from a saber grip to a reverse grip when I'm in these ground fighting type situations. So, as you can see, we didn't have a quick draw per se. It was in the middle of combat, under stress, wasn't very fast, but it's a very real situation. Here's another example of a combat stress quick draw. This time he'll be giving me a attack with his right hand, be a right-handed individual. I might not be aware of this sudden attack. He gives me that attack, and I'm going to slash it over, my hand over the top, and I catch it. Here comes my quick draw process. I deliver that powerfully up into the rib cage or stomach with a twist. Hammer down and turn. And then we'll finish. Notice that the entire time, I'm very concerned about that weapon. I don't want that arm to slip through my torso or my arm, at least it get cut. So I'm real tight and low, trying to hang on to that weapon-bearing limb. And here, techniques we'll talk about later. We'll show you some of the ways. Now, inside these combat scenarios, oftentimes are the combat folder quick draws. And one of the things that makes it unique is the fact that you've got to access the blade, find the index, open it up, and then use it in the middle of a combat scenario. Sometimes you'll be fortunate enough to have your knife out already. Another really exciting feature about the combat folder, if you can't access, open, and use it right away, is the fact that a closed folder is little more than a palm stick. And any type of palm stick type techniques that you have seen or learned before can apply to the combat folder, you know. And it's hard on this side, hard on this side. It has two real advantages. It has a striking point, and also it can be used as a brass knuckle, you know, when it's closed, providing that your knife isn't too wide and will injure your hand when you strike with it. And so to kind of familiarize yourself with this, you can practice at home or practice hitting something. Everyone knows the numbers on a clock. And you can practice using the clock. You have a 12 o'clock strike, and then a 1 o'clock strike, and then a 2 o'clock strike, and 3. When you get down around to the 6, you have this delivery right here, 6 o'clock, and then 7, and then 8 o'clock, then 9 o'clock, 10, and then 11. Then you would switch hands and be able to use your palm stick this way. There are many different angles of attack and all kinds of different systems to work on, but who can forget the clock? So if you go home and you use the clock, angles of attack, it'll open up your muscle memory to different diverse methods that you've never used before, and you can use this as a palm stick. There are many applications to the palm stick approach. And if you study fixed blade knives, some of them refer to the pommel strike, but now you've got two pommels. And again, this is when it's so hot, you don't even have a time to wait to take the blade to come out. You've got to use it right away. Here's just one example of a combat scenario where this may come into play. If he gives me just a low stomach slash and I stop it, I hit, I strike, very delicate area behind the ear and the jawbone, I smash into the groin. And then ever holding on to this weapon-bearing limb right here, and then hammer down into the base of the neck as he drops down. I don't let this knife slip between my arm and my torso. From here, I'll just finish him, do whatever I have to do. Here is the kind of brass knuckle application to the using the knife. Let's show that again. We'll do it from this side. That's a brief overview of quick draws, and you'll have to understand you have to practice that yourself with the knife that you've selected. But I'd like to talk about now some more combat issues involving the combat folder. The fact that 6 or 7 people have these things that they're carrying out of 10 if they're carrying a knife. And so we must be prepared to fight the combat folder, sometimes empty-handed. And you might not get a chance to pull your knife if he's beating you to the draw. And so the first level alert is, of course, in a tense situation, you're trusting your instincts. If something is not going good, it's dangerous. And you are expected to be able to look at that individual and detect where his weapons might be. Think of the common carry sites, gun or knife. And be looking at his belt line. Look for the telltale clip that you can detect, or be looking for, you know, along this side, too, where it might be a cross draw. Look for the telltale carry sites that you have already been trained and know to look for. The next thing you have to worry about is the famous police expression, you know, it is the hands that will kill you. And not only do alert citizens and soldiers, and nowadays soldiers doing all the policing actions, we have to be, you know, looking for the peripheral surroundings, but also very much aware of these, because these are what will kill you. Identify the movements to the common carry sites. Well, if it's the same side quick draw, what does this tell you? You know? What does this tell you? And if you're alert and trained, you should be already bringing your metabolism up to try to respond to this individual. And so these are the things that are getting you alert and getting ready to for you to respond. There's another thing that I want to mention that comes to us from police training, a concept called hypervigilance. And that is that when your brain detects an imminent threat and it decides that you are not fast enough to respond to that threat, it shuts you down and you freeze. It's got nothing to do with whether you're a coward, whether you're fearful, or any of those things. It's just a switch that makes you decide that you don't have time to respond. And it's a state in police training we call hypervigilance. And you can defeat that hypervigilance by training and working your muscle memories, and in essence, tricking that switch that you can respond, and then it possibly will allow you to take action. Now, if a bad guy, we'll have Randy come out here, if he's got a knife and he's pulling a knife, I could have a bazooka on me. But human reaction time will prevent me to access my weapon because I'm a second or so behind, or microseconds behind. And so I may have one choice. I may have bayonets, hand grenades, all kinds of pistols, and yet you'll see me engage in hand-to-hand combat because of this reaction time issue. Why didn't you shoot him? Why didn't you pull out your knife? Couldn't. Too late. I've had many police supervisors ask me that question. Why didn't you just shoot him? Well, because I didn't have time to go for my gun. I had to go for this weapon-bearing limb. Counters to quick draws is what I like to call early phase, mid phase, and late phase counters. And you can scientifically make lists of techniques and tactics for these three areas. Early phase is when you see that hand motion going to pick the weapon and beginning to draw it. Mid phase is when the person's almost completed in opening up the knife. And late phase is where most people train commonly, and that's the knife is out, it's either coming at you or it's presented and about to be coming at you. And those are where most martial tactics and techniques spend their time, when the knife is in play. But we're going to show you some early phase and some mid phases. And this particular one is very relative to the combat folder. When you or your enemy is in the process of pulling out a combat folding knife, he does not have a sufficient combat grip on that handle of that weapon. Why? Because in the act of pulling it, he's got to concern himself with opening up the blade. Not a problem with fixed blades. And so during this process, he is trying to index that mechanism and trying to get that knife in. What that means is he has a lessening, non-powerful grip on this handle, something that you can take advantage of. And so if we have Randy coming out here just as a demonstration, that knife would be on his way out. And I know, because I've been trained, I've seen the clip, it's a combat folder. A first preemptive strike. As he's coming out and starting to pull that blade out, you see he's got a funky, loose grip on it. It's not a combat grip. And what I would have you do is hammer fist that hand. Hammer, forearm strike, anything that you can do in the early phase to blast that weapon as it's coming out. Let's take a look at it again. And so this is a counter to a quick draw that is unique only to the folding knife. Here it comes out again. I can hammer it, I can back fist it, but I want to catch it and smash it at the point where the person is manipulating its opening. Here is another early to almost mid-phase counter to a quick draw. You're firing on all pistons. You've seen that he might have a weapon. You've identified the common hand movements to those common carry sites. And this one is where we start to reiterate the fact that it's now grappling time. And now we have to do some techniques that appear in the grappling category. And so we have our individual here, and he is beginning to pull out this knife. He's getting it on you, getting it on you. It's starting to clear. He's opened it up. And this is a very good technique. Take advantage of this, and it'll be your first gut instinct. You'll want to seize this hand. Well, gee, what happens next, you know? Well, there's a bunch of things that you can do, but this is what, an untrained person may do. And what they'll begin to engage in some sort of inefficient, sloppy, and dangerous wrestling match. Here's a trick for you, and it involves an old grappling technique. What I'm going to, I'm bursting in already, and I'm catching and seizing this weapon-bearing limb. I'm going to run through and give it back to him. It's a life or death situation. This is one of the several options that you can do. Let's do it from this side, right over here. He begins to lift this knife out. I catch it, and I run through. Now, I don't want you to stop here, because it ain't over till it's over. You have to have something else in your bag of tricks. A lot of times, I like to hammer that blade in a second time, because hopefully, as this works out usually, the knife is horizontal, the rib cage bones run horizontally. So you probably have a pretty good entry. But it's not over till it's over. You may kick the leg out and take him down. You may do a host of different things. Oftentimes, I like to get the rear arm bar from here, but we'll be explaining that shortly. So here's the essence of the movement. And a trick I'd like to show you that's very important. As this knife comes out, instinctively, I seize it. And I run a 100-yard dash through this guy, which is very confusing to the enemy because suddenly you're here and now you're over here. A lot of times, muscled up people will not allow you to bend this. They'll resist this bend. Now what do you do? Because you're stuck. That's his human nature, to create resistance in this limb. It is almost reflexive and natural. This is a trick that I show that a lot of people, don't think about or know. When you're in this position, I like to canter up this sort of breaking point shot, just freeze in that position, like this. So essentially, it's like a modified elbow strike that defeats this protective mechanism. Once I've got the bend in the arm, then I can turn and just drive. I could do it with my upper body strength, or if need be, I can lock it in and do another 100-yard dash into him. And from here, wherever you are, is where you would do some finishing technique. It ain't over till it's over. Here is another early to mid-phase counter to your typical strong side quick draw. It involves another famous jiu-jitsu-like technique. And so we have our individual pulling out the blade, and he's popped it open, and I'm again doing this reflexive grab. Here, I run through again, and I get him into what we call the standing or center arm twist lock. There are many, many different names. But basically, you have the say-hi position, a straight arm position, and a down position. And this is the area that you want him in. You can have a little leeway and be outbent this way. But I am just twisting the heck out of this wrist, twisting and twisting upward. And I'm going to continue this twisting upward, up, and then torque it down. Very painful. It's not... Come on up again. But I want you to understand something. It's not just about pain, and that's a common misconception about joint locks. You can't count on pain to make people do things for you because they're caked with adrenaline and sometimes in a fight. Needless to say, drugs. So your strategies cannot be based completely upon pain. What they have to be based on in these type of grappling situations are structural weaknesses in the human skeleton. Pain just lets this guy know, hey, your arm's twisted in a structural weakness, you better get out of there. Pain is like a secondary issue. If you want to control and dominate, you take advantage of the skeletal structure and the weaknesses therein and not focus in on the pain because you can't count on pain. People have high pain tolerance, low pain tolerance, adrenaline rushes. Pain's not the objective. And when we get our guy up in this position, it's a structural breaking weakness that we're working against. And here I am, and I'm just going to twist up and just freeze. Twist up in this particular angle. It's bad once you get it. And then from this position, you make your choice morally, ethically, legally, what you need to do. And bail out of the progression, run, stop, kill, fight, take prisoner, interrogate, whatever you do for your particular situation. And here I am. I can use my own body weight to drop the knife, hammer it home, or any type of finishing technique. Let's show that from the other side over here. We have the quick draw. I catch. Down he goes, and then we finish him. I have defined a particular recognizable point. I call it the quick draw triangle, in which you see that person creates a triangle on the side. This also works with handguns, too. And so now this will change in varying degrees. You'll recognize the gunfighter's crouch. You know, he'll bend over and start to pull the weapon. And part of this will appear beautifully this way for you. You'd love to see this. But sometimes it's like this. You know, sometimes it's a little bit inhibited and flat to your appearance. But nonetheless, this is a kickoff that, you know, this weapon is about to be pulled on you. What I like to show now as a counter to this and a capture is a technique I've used so many times as a cop, I just can't remember. And it's a rear arm bar or an arm bar hammerlock. And as he starts to pull out that knife and it's on its way out, I'm going to shoot the triangle. I'm going to shoot right in that triangle and run in. Turn around and capture this arm in this structurally weakened position. Now, many things you can do from here. Typically, a lot of people will show this. This is not worth anything. I've tried to use this as a cop. All he's got to do is rear back and use all his torso muscles versus my arm, one arm muscles. He's defeated this. This is worthless. You've got to pack it up with groin strikes and head strikes to make this work. This is more of a control position right here, and down here is the real structural weakness that can take a guy right to the ground. So you have three options here: bad, better, best. Let's turn around right around here. We have not so good to bad, a little bit better, more of a control measure here, and then right in this joint with this cradled in here, the best, the most powerful. As you can see in these last two, I have an ability, you know, to try to take out this knife. So here we are. Our situation, he begins to pull the knife. I shoot the triangle and come around. Options you can do. I can take out this knife from here. Good thing to do right away. Use it on him. Or I can kick this leg, drop him down to the ground, control him from here. Once I take out this knife, I can just do a kill shot and stab him. I can grab this hand, snap the arm. Many different things you can do from the rear arm bar or the arm bar hammerlock. The term hammer comes from the fact that, just freeze in that position there, I'm hammering down. And I think that's where the origination of the hammer comes from. I show up just from one more side. He's there. I shoot the gap, run in, and then take out this knife, continue the attack. Do anything that you might want to do to finish him off. The next thing we'll take a look at is a counter to a quick draw that is a cross draw in nature. And some people will pack their knives and guns on the far side, and you'll detect the motion because the hand will travel the center of the body. Now, this is an unusual position unless someone is reaching across and pulling out something from an inside coat pocket. There's not many reasons why somebody reaches over like this. And as a police officer for many years, that's always been a tip-off of mine that trouble might be happening, and it's time for you to spring into action. But here's a common counter to this type of quick draw. I see the hand, I see the motion, and it's a early to mid phase. Again, I catch the weapon-bearing limb as quickly as I can, and I'm going to try to follow this motion around and chunk them down in what might typically be referred to as an outer wrist torque throw. You'll find almost all the martial systems have this type of tactic. Let's get up again and we'll talk to some more specifics about it over here. He pulls out and I catch it, and I'm kind of taking this action with me. As concisely as possible, my mission is to take this palm and place it on the floor. And if I do big wide circles, there's too much play and too many ways for him not to have a structural weakness and not to feel pain. So it's got to be small and tight. And I want to twist this down onto the ground. In doing so, when you put stress on the joint and attack the wrist of the weapon-bearing limb, it usually lessens the grip strength of the knife, and it affords you an opportunity to do something else. A short knife, you know, you have to be careful when you start doing disarms, a typical combat folder situation, you know, because you may cut your hand. But if you cut your hand, you're still alive. You have an option: aspirin or death, stitches or death. You fight to win, you fight to survive. And so if I'm here, I might be able to take out that knife, and here again you do what it is that you legally, morally, ethically have to do to survive. There are many different ways, just hold that right there, there are many different ways to do this throw. And in hardcore, simple, effective combat, I only ask for it to pass to this quality point where it's quick, hard, and it works. Some people say, catch the thumb. Some people say, tie up these two fingers. Just rip that wrist, get that hand down as quickly and efficiently as possible. And right from there. So you're taking an outer wrist throw, and converting it into a counter to a quick draw. In the heat of combat, and you may have a knife, and someone may be rushing at you or attacking you with a knife, for example. And if he's swinging at you, you must make an effort to stop that inward attack. It's more imminent, and taking a second or two to reach and pull your weapon may be too late. And there's a thing that in the combat sciences, you know, of reaction time. And the person who attacks first has an edge. You have to see the attack, process the information. Your mind, like a computer, whips through some files, picks out a response. This is all precious time that's passing. Microseconds, surely, but still precious time. So your first reaction is not always to go to your knife or to a gun or something like that, but to react empty-handed. The next thing I'm about to show you might be the most important, life-saving, anti-knife drill that you could ever possibly do. And we'll give it to you in progressive steps, but if you can develop these steps, it is vital for your survival. And the first thing I have to do is train you so that you can have an attack pattern, so that you can attack your partner. Now, this attack pattern includes slashes and stabs, both high and low, in a concise set so that your partner sees many of the potential things that a basic knife fighter will assault you with and an advanced knife fighter can assault you with. Different angles that most people do. Some have small sets of angles. They're not efficient. It's elementary school. You want to be able to train and see the attacks of the advanced fighter. I'm going to show them to you once forward, sideways, and kind of backwards so that my right hand is your right hand. We're going to hit on the four corners in these efficient slashes. We have one corner, we have two corners, we have three corners, and we have four corners. The four corners, easy to remember. The next little set is going to be an upside-down triangle. We have a stomach stab, we have a chest stab, and then we have a chest stab over here. A novice might ask, well, who in the world is going to attack somebody this way? Well, you wouldn't start that way, but if you were a knife fighter and you slashed and missed, you're in this position. And you will, to best take advantage, you'll fire that knife in this way rather than change positions. It's quick, it's efficient, economical to attack this way. So, yes, skilled fighters will come get you this way. That was the upside-down triangle. Now we have a rhyme. Thigh, thigh, eye, I, and then number 12, like the clock, 12 o'clock high, 12 comes straight down. So, let me do it for you sideways. The four corners, one corner, two corner, three corners, and four corners. The four corners. The upside down triangle. Stomach with a little twist to get the knife out. Chest, and then chest. The rhyme. Thigh, thigh, eye, and number 12 is straight down. This is nothing but an attack drill so that your partner has a way to feed you efficiently and you'll learn these skills. And so the first skill we're going to approach is going to be a life-saving technique. If you ask veteran police officers, medical personnel, EMTs, combat veterans, there's a common thread to their survival when they're in a knife fight, and that is they have latched on, grabbed the weapon-bearing limb. This is your first step to survival. Once they latch onto the weapon-bearing limb, they fight on from there. Too often we refer to passing the knife, which is a high-level skill that you should do as a secondary strategy. Learn to pass the blade, but it's a secondary strategy. If you want to live, you prioritize the grab, and this is how you do it. His knife is now open. He's pulled that combat knife, and he's beginning to attack you. You might still have your combat folder on, but you can't get to it yet. The time it takes to pull it out and open it, he's already drawn maybe even serious first blood or death. And so, as he gives me this angle one, I grab the weapon-bearing limb. I can grab it this way. 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 But grab it, because it will save your life. And you'll follow up with these other steps that we're showing you. He gives me angle 2. I catch it any way that I can. He gives me the third corner of the 4 corners. I catch it any way that I can. He gives me 4, and I catch it. He gives me the stomach stab, and I catch. 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 We'll rotate a little bit. I catch it any way that I can. I catch it any way that I can. I catch it any way that I can. I catch it any way, and any catch. This is the first step of this drill. Isolate this and develop it. The next part of the progression, it comes in. Now, that one of the first 4 corners again. I do any catch. Still got a knife on here. Shouldn't get to it quite yet. Now, I've cemented this grip as best I can. I do any kick. The reason I teach the kick first is I'm afraid, we'll turn around this way, I'm afraid that when it comes in, if you're too quick to hand strike, you'll forego a little of this life-saving capture right here. So the kick is meant to disrupt and disable right away. And then we're going to go to the hand strike. He gives me number 1. Any catch, any kick, any strike. This particular one is a lead pipe strike, this forearm from here to here. If you're a little tight, it's an elbow strike. If you're a little long, you know, it's a ridge hand or a hammer fist. But the lead pipes, we're walking around with 2 lead pipes on our arms. They're awesome weapons. He gives me angle 2. Any catch, any kick, any strike. Over here for 3. Any catch, any kick, any strike. And number 4, any catch, any kick, any strike. Now we'll finish with a takedown of the corner. And we've been developing this skill slowly. Spend time in each one of these areas. Basically, if you want to dominate any fight, you know, we attack the head. We stun the brains. The brain splashes up against the skull. Or sometimes, if you get it right, the brain actually tries to turn inside the skull. These are the tears, the rips, you know, the explosions that create unconsciousness, or the diminished fighter. And if he's got a knife or if he doesn't have a knife, the more diminished the fighter is, the more techniques and chance for survival. You want to dominate the fight? Attack the head. He gives me angle 1. I get any catch. I get any kick. I get any strike. And then from here, any takedown. You know, I cover that hand because a lot of times people will fly up and kick you. I still have my folder on, but I just can't get to it safely yet. And from here, I've tried to trap this weapon. I've tried to knock him unconscious. You finish it to whatever is appropriate for you. I may take out the knife at this time. I may not. I may take his. He may be through. We're over here. He gives me the backhand. Any catch, any kick, any strike, and then any takedown. One, and a finish. This, folks, is what I like to call your karate moment. This is why karate people break bricks, pieces of wood, blocks of ice. It's not to get a trophy, or I break 6 instead of 7 or 10. It is for these times you develop that power and drive to deliver the unconscious rendering blow, the rib break, you know, or the groin shot. That's what that's for years ago. Now, he gives me that low shot. Any catch, any kick, any strike, and any takedown. I don't expect you at this level to be a black belt in jiu-jitsu. All you've got to do is develop 3 or 4 takedowns and use them repeatedly in this type of situation. I've taught Marines, Army, soldiers, martial artists this particular drill. Often the question is asked, what do we do against a knife attack? This is a good, effective, simple, hardcore pattern to follow. A next step later, we might engage in this passing idea. And if this knife comes in and I miss it, I miss the grab, I might pass it and then catch it as soon as I can. You know, we practice so many drills, you know, and they become a looping affair. A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. D loops back to A, and your muscle memory carries that with you, and you wind up passing too much. Remember, we have to become fighting experts, not drill experts. And if you've got to fight and train in these combat scenarios, these combat scenarios are as close as you can get to reality. And you have to ask yourself that question, do I want to be a drill expert and do 1,002 drills, or do I want to learn how to fight, protect myself, and win and survive? Lean toward the combat scenario because it's as close as you'll get to the real thing. And so what we'll ask you to do here on this one, we take angle one, I missed it. I pass, and then I catch, and then I kick, and then I strike, and then I take down. He gives me two. I missed the catch. I pass. Catch it out over here. Any kick, any strike. That strike may have taken him down. Look at this position right here. Any takedown. Now we're going to show you times where we can incorporate the quick draw of your combat folder in this situation. And this is when I talk about when I refer to overall combat strategies, because you have to learn how to just fight in general. Fight empty-handed. Fight with a knife. Fight with a stick. Fight with a gun. You have to learn all these things and put them in the weapons continuum where they apply. So if he gives me angle one, I've done any catch. I've done any kick. I've done any strike. There's a forearm pipe strike right here. I may come down and take him down. I can either take his knife, or at this point, if I don't feel like safely, I can get mine out. And now I'm using it and pulling it quick draw style in the safest time that I possibly can. You know, many things you can do with, at this point, you've diminished the heck out of them. Knocked the hell out of them, kicked them, and now you can do here's where the push-pull style knife disarms may be the perfect time to use them. You know, I've popped out the knife, and then you can do whatever it is that you need to do that's appropriate. Enemy soldier, Nazi, kill him. Take him prisoner, contain him, whatever. Nothing says you can't go up here and then go into an unconscious stomp kick and take him out from there. But I'd like for you, at the tail end of this little set that we're doing, to try to access that knife at a safe point and see where you might be able to use it. I cannot tell you how important this little unarmed versus the knife drill is. Practice it. Catch the weapon-bearing limb as your primary survival strategy and fight like hell from there. It's not over till it's over. I like to use that phrase a lot, because in my 23 years in police work and 3 years now as a private investigator, plus to include all the martial arts since 1972, I've discovered the tenacity of human beings and their ability to survive in all these arenas that I just mentioned. Martial artists take vicious beatings sometimes in tests. They keep on going. Broken ribs, broken hands, they keep fighting. Victims and criminals who are shot, who are stabbed in horrific car wrecks. You know, and just how tenacious they are. They survive. They get up. They continue to go. And so you cannot execute a move and expect or anticipate that opponent is shut down. You have to continue to fight, continue to throw the person down, stabilize them, control them, or finish them, because it's not over till it's over. And people almost literally are resurrected from the dead sometimes in combat. And they continue to fight, just at a time when your guard is down. Now we're entering into a phase of combat folder tactics where we've been able to open up the knife. And when the combat folder is open, it becomes just like a fixed blade, but again, a shorter fixed blade than most common ones. Sometimes the blade is even shorter than this. And remember, the blade length that you have to check it out with your local jurisdiction. Not only do state laws affect the length of blades, but even municipalities have Class C misdemeanors that can tell you what size knives and what you should carry. Some allow fixed blades, but won't let you to carry even a folding knife. And some will allow you to carry a box cutter, but not a folding knife. Check where you are to make sure what you're doing is okay. But once that we have our whatever length blade is now open, there's two fundamental things that we must explore that can be controversial to some knife-interested instructors and students. And that is the debate on whether stabbing or slashing is better. And frankly, you could ask any veteran cop, any soldier, any EMT doctor, and they can tell you that there are many survivors of slashing attacks and many survivors of stabbing attacks. The key essence is that it's about the target. It's the target that you slash or the target that you stab that makes the difference is how effective it's going to be. And it's not over till it's over. And anywhere that you think that you have stabbed somebody and killed them, you can guarantee that there's a hospital emergency room that's going to have a story about a guy who walked in with a knife stuck out of that deadly place and saying, "Can you take this out for me?" Because that's life. That's the chaos of life. And we had one of our students is a Wisconsin police officer. He tried to prevent a suicide, and the man had a knife over his heart. And, "Don't come any closer. I'm going to stab myself." And they kept talking to him. And finally, he plunged the knife into his heart. Surely dead, by any account. And he just stood there. And all the officers stood there. And they rushed him, took his hand away, laid him down. EMTs came, they taped off the knife, and they took him to the hospital. It turned out that somehow that blade had entered, and the heart kind of folded over and under the blade. Barely hurt the heart at all. But if you were to look at a picture of that man or see that happen, you'd say, "My God, he's dead." So do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? The fact is that when you think you've finished the fight, it might not be. If you think you've shot the guy and he's down, it might not be over. And so you have to take precautions about whether you slash or stab, that you have to make sure that the fight is over. And so it's more important to worry about the targets that get stabbed and slashed rather than what is one more superior than the other. You have to think about clothing. Half the year, half the world are wearing big parkas and jackets. And slashing sometimes won't penetrate those, whereas stabbing will. I've worked countless murders in 23 years and hundreds more of attempted murders and aggravated assaults and robberies where knives have been used. And people who seem to be dead have come back. And a single tiny pocket knife. In 1 week, I've had 2 murder cases where a small pocket knife was stabbed into the heart of a person and then the eye of a person. And this little tiny novelty knife killed both of them. And it was a bar fight, a ground fight, and the knife came out on the ground. Person stabbed in the eye, up into the brain. I pulled up on the scene, arrested the killer. The man was freshly dead from a knife about this big when it's open. Another time, 2 gas station attendants fighting over a pencil. One 17-year-old stabbed the other 16-year-old, threw a parka into the heart, killed him, And then you have the story of Wisconsin. So you tell me, when is it over? It's never over. And you're risking your life if you think that it is and don't follow up to make sure. So it's all about target acquisition. Now that we have our knife open, and we may opt to stab or slash, whatever we see fit to have to do. When we stab, I just want to reiterate the fact that when the knife goes in, you should twist it as it goes in, when it's in, or on the way out, because this will hopefully ensure the evacuation of the wound, plus make a more grievous injury. So these are the ways that you can counter some of these terrible situations. There are numerous stories in combat, especially in the South Pacific, in which our GIs attacked the enemy and they couldn't get their K-bars or knives out of the opponent. They just didn't know how. Plus the opponent doubled over and tumbled away and they lost their knife. But now it's become an elite training method to understand this twist. The U.S. Marines now call it the crowbar, but you've got to twist that blade to free it from the skeletal structure or the muscle suction of the enemy. Slashing or stabbing, either way. We're going to go now to the fact that our knives are out, we've popped open our combat folders, and now we're in this endeavor. Now, many times in real life, when two people are in a face-off situation, knife versus knife, that's the end of the fight. They find some excuse, they posture, their friends hold them back, they yell, they carry on, you know, but they know the dangers of what's involved. And if you have the Sheriff of Nottingham versus Robin Hood predicament, it's not often occurring, and we train disproportionately in that range too much, when in actuality real combat occurs in close quarter, hands-on, on the ground, in different configurations. Let me get Mike Gillette out here for a second. Here might be our typical Robin Hood versus the Sheriff of Nottingham encounter that so many people practice that is disproportionate to reality. But you know, you've got to study tactics here. We may be in a fight with no knives just yet, fighting up against a wall. I go for my knife, he sees it. I see him pulling out his, we push off. Suddenly, it's the Sheriff of Nottingham versus Robin Hood. You've got to learn stuff here, but this is far from the only place that you should study. And the next typical range, we're in a little bit closer. In an invasion or close quarter combat, and we're going to be doing specific combat scenarios in this area. The next particular problem is hands-on. We're closer now. I call these in the clutches of. And statistically, based upon police and military and martial research, these three things can happen. We have high captures or in the clutches of. We have low predicaments or captures in the clutches of. And then we have mixed. Then you have the occasional right-handed versus left-handed guy. 15, 20% of your material, you have to worry about this, otherwise your muscle memory will be totally confused when these things start to happen. And so here we have a close quarter thing. There are techniques that we must learn to fight in this particular area too. And then we have problems where situations, close quarter, where you've got your knife out in a reverse grip concealed, that we're going to show you, where someone can get too close, armed or unarmed, and you use your knife as your element of surprise against him to defend yourself. Then we have knife ground fighting, which is, again, I mentioned a murder case that I worked on. These things all happen in the knife fight, and we're going to try to address these for you. Thanks. Let's get Randy out here, and the first thing that I want to show you is to some, a lost technique that the U.S. Marines used to teach Colonel Anthony Drexel Biddle, who was a pioneer in these types of training methods back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And it is a disarming. No one owns the names and titles of these disarming techniques. If history will show us, attacking the weapon-bearing limb is as Spartan soldiers work this. Hieroglyphics in Egypt show these tactics. Filipinos did it. Some call it defanging the snake. Some don't have that name. Basically, though, they're impact disarms. And what I'm about to show you was called by Biddle a marine cut, or just a impact disarm. And this will lead us into more techniques with more motion to it. But I want to do this for you slowly to give you an idea of what it is. If we're in this squared off situation, or even if we're a little bit closer, I'll take my open combat folder, and this time with the edge out, as first prescribed by them, and smash it into the forearm as best that I can. And the thing is that if I hit this properly and chip it out, you know, I could, like on a piece of wood, I could take out bone on this motion. But it is an impact disarm that may or may not create a disarm. You see, I may have just wounded that arm. He may be hanging on to it. I can catch anywhere up here. So I can't guarantee just hitting this arm, just hitting this arm, just hitting this arm. Doesn't mean he's going to drop the knife. If you think that, you're risking your life dramatically. It can happen, but it ain't over till it's over. So I'm going to hit. Now, whether he drops the knife or not, I'm not going to worry about it. I clutch the weapon-bearing limb, and then I take this knife, and there's just a gap right here between here and here. I'm going to fire this through the throat. Once I've gotten this past here, I will then retract this at almost a 90-degree angle, counting on the fact that my knife, as most knives are sharp at least up to this point, on this end right here. And then I'm going to do a back cut, a Marine-style back cut that, again, rips through the throat. Now, his brain is still working. He has just sent neurological messages into his body. It ain't over till it's over. I can't laugh. I can't say I've won. I can't do any of these things. I can't parade around proud that it's not over. So I've cut through, I've cut back, and now I've got to do something else. Let's take a look at this again. This time I'm edge out. We'll do it from this angle here. I hit, cut through, cut back. Now might be a good time. He's diminished. I can do the push-pull disarm. Finish. Military-style power stab. And any type of takedown. I've got the makings of an outer wrist lock throw. I can turn. I can continue to attack him. Any of these things. But do you see the application of this impact disarm and the quick follow-through? Let me show it to you towards the camera. Edge out. I hit, capture, explode through the throat, retract the wrist, and explode back. And then do something else from here. The other thing that was taught was that the edge would be in. Many knife fighters are trained to fight in this sort of manner. Up in the window of combat, they rotate, hack the forearm, grab, cut through the throat, retract, and rip back, and then do any tactics or techniques from here. So these are an introduction to this sort of combat. Now I'll give you some more finished combat scenarios. But I want you to practice this. Very important. This grip, vital. You know, you can have a knife, be a knife fighter, but you need endurance. You need wind. You need a certain level of muscular strength to succeed. And this hand in close quarter knife combat, we call it many different things, a support hand. They have many names for it. I like to use Colonel Biddle's name for it, the grab hand. Its mission is to grab the opponent and the enemy. It's up here. It's not dormant by my side. It is not posted on my hip back here. You know, it is not serving pie behind me. You know, I'm not fighting anybody over here. I need this hand up here as quickly as possible. And it is not epoxied to my chest, which is originally passed on as keep your hands up, put it on your chest. And people overdo this way too much. It needs to be up and ready, the grab hand for this purpose. It can strike, it can grab, it can pull, you know, it can disarm, up and ready. And so we'll take a look now at, we'll have Randy come in, and I'll give you one combat scenario that you can kind of develop in this situation. We are out here. I've already tried to grab the chair, hit him. You know, I don't have that option in this particular situation, much use of the environment. And so what I'm going to do is he can give me a slice in. He's attacking me, and I'm going to create an impact. And for our study at this point in time, it worked. And the knife falls from his hand. And now, and when you're practicing this, I urge you every time to have your training partner drop the knife, because we're touching something back here. You know, we're touching muscle memory, and sometimes you see guys cheat and kind of go like this. You're only screwing with the survival mentality of your training partner. Drop the knife so he now knows it's safe to come in, and I would expect at this point right here, I'll hit the throat. Now, as this knife is clearing this target here, I strike here. You know, now as this knife is now ready here, I might strike here, and then strike here. Minimum 6 attacks to create the decimation of the opponent. Why am I so free and easy with my legs and my hands? Because back here I saw that he is now disarmed. And I can go like a banshee. You know, when a panther takes down game, it doesn't just use one little claw. It uses its whole muscular system, every ounce of its power and strength and its claws to defeat its prey. And that's what I ask you to do. I ask you to use your hands, your legs, every part of your teeth, if necessary, to win the fight. And you can do those things when the opponent is disarmed. And so he gives us this shot. There, boom, 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 boom. We let him have it. Take him down. Let's see it again. So inside these motions, I want to further develop some of your options. He gives me, Trent will give me this strike. I hit and I get a disarm. And these could be any strikes, a downward strike, low strike stabs, doesn't matter. What I want to try to do right now, while this arm is engaged here, this fist or any strike will come in and catch. And I told you that you have to be diverse in your knowledge about fighting. It's very difficult to punch the bowling ball. The skull is a bowling ball. And I always like to aim very, very low to a softer, more givable, pliable area, like to the throat. You shouldn't be elbowing the bowling ball. You shouldn't be punching the bowling ball. You should not be using your bowling ball to hit his bowling ball so much, because the potential in the chaos of motion and combat to knock yourself out is devastating. I want you to continue doing some of these, but cautiously, and not try to build an entire fighting system around hitting your bowling. It's your brains, for God's sakes. You can't be bashing bowling balls and hard skulls together. So that's good to get that knife. He hit, I get this action, and then I hit. Notice, and then I strike low. I got a knife. Try to overuse your most deadly weapon. I'll strike into the solar plexus. Right here, my knife is busy, so I'll hammer down here, Then I might strike with a kick. Do you see what I'm saying? A wide array of martial techniques to support the knife attack. As an advanced study to this particular move, I want to take you back to what if you were the one who got disarmed. Trent will come out here, and then I take a swing at him, and he strikes me, and I've lost my weapon. Well, what do you do next? Just freeze in that position. Don't you remember, we're now back where we were before in the empty hand versus knife drill. Hopefully, I've got some grip left. Hopefully, adrenaline has protected me against some of this pain, and I'm not totally disabled. He might rear back and strike me. Any catch, any kick, any strike, any takedown. You see how? And suddenly, you're back in that particular thing. We're over here. We'll show. He gives me the backhand. He's cut me. He comes in. Any catch, any kick, any strike, and any takedown. And so you see now the progression of the development. So you yourself can be disarmed in a knife attack, and now you have some options. You're resorting back now to your empty hand versus knife muscle memory training. And now the connecting strategies that work with the impact disarm. Obviously, many times that you hit that weapon-bearing limb, as I've discussed, the weapon does not go. Well, what do you do there? And we'll get Mike Gillette out and go through this slowly so you get the overall idea. Our first study, we're going to hit, and he drops the knife. But that doesn't happen all the time. And so our next group of study is he'll come in, we'll hit, and you say, oh, no, he's still got that knife. Then we're now entering into what I call the chain drills, or the chain of the knife. I have to come in and create the first link of the chain that captures and controls this weapon-bearing limb, And then from here, we have a mixed bag of different things that can happen. But you see, this is the equation. Reads knife, hand, knife. Now, one of the common practices is a slash on here. And people get very cavalier, and they'll pass it, and this guy's still slashing. So sometimes, that's why I don't say slash, grab, and stab. I say knife, because the knife sometimes acts as a force that will stop the energy. The knife, if I'm out here and I can cut far enough away, well, then he can continue the slash and be injured and wound. But if you're in close quarter combat, you can't do that. So the knife acts as a stopping energy, or a blocking style force. We hit, boom, and then we catch. So it's knife, hand, and then what we're going to take a look at next is knife follow-ups. That's the equation for the chain of the knife drill. Knife, hand, knife. And let's take a look at a real quick one. He gives me one. I hit, I grab the first available and best target, if that hand is down there, just to the throat. Of our attack, the 12 angles of attack that we learned before. Number 2, stop, grab, cut. He's over here. Stop, grab, cut. Stop, grab, cut. There's the four corners. We'll just do the upside down triangle. He gives me a stomach stab. I stop, I grab, and I cut. He gives me the high harpoon stomp. I grab, and then I cut. I stop, I grab, and then I stab. And you can break these down. You can do all stabs. You can do all slashes to attack him, or you can do a mix of both depending, on where you are. Let's take a look at another application. Here's one. I may cut this hand. If this hand is realistically up to interfere with me, and this is the next problem that you'll get. I hit, and his hand catches me. This is what we're trying to defeat, because now we're in the clutches of, and we'll have some strategies for this. But to counter, to prevent this from happening, I'm going to hit, grab, and cut that hand. Now that shot right there could have cut the web pretty deeply, may have hacked off some fingers depending on the belly of your blade and the movements that you used. We'll turn around this way here. If he comes in, I hit the hand. Sometimes catch the wrist pretty good. It's not over yet. He's got time to bleed out. The back here, I hit, boom, boom. The low corner over here. The low corner over here. You see, and right away, see, that's what I'm doing right there, but I'm slowing down for demonstration purposes. He gives me that shot, give me that low one over here. You see, I'm hitting the arm, hitting the hand. Get that isolated and developed. And then you can finish up with this one here. Again. How quick, how efficient, how, it's just kind of like doing this. It gives me the number two of the two corners. Hand, throw. The stomach stab. The chest stab. This hand is in the way. Maybe you can get all of them at the same time. Nice diminishment on the person. Develop that to these 12 angles. Many, many steps involved, and nuances, changes, counters that you can use. One, the grab, the cut, the stab, and now it ain't over till it's over, the takedown part. If you going to do a rear takedown with the blade up against the throat, there's several different ways to do it. This is a real gruesome killing technique. We'll turn just a tad this way here. Real gruesome killing technique, but if it's pushing power you want, if it's takedown power you want, this is not too effective because that knife will penetrate all the way up to the hilt or guard or your hand before you'll start the actual takedown. If you turn it sideways, you have kind of a, more flat surface and almost a less than lethal approach to taking him down. If you turn it sideways, he has any consciousness about him, he may be helping you by trying to get that head away from the throat. And then from here, I will turn completely around this way. I will step beyond his fall line, beyond the line that is drawn between his two heels. You see, a lot of times when people do this rear takedown, they kind of get in this even-Steven predicament where strong guy wins. We're both here. He's stronger than me, he throws me. I'm stronger than him, I throw him. Or we may, be more diminished than each other, and the more alert person may do it. But I like to travel past that fall line, pulling here. So I'm not in that situation anymore. Pulling down, and then I've got the knife up against the throat. I'll step and reap. Some people like two legs. That's a viable technique. I will usually do one and freeze in that position. I'm doing a big circle. This is the most common, popular, Olympic gold medal winning takedown that you should have in your muscle memory all the time. I can't remember how many times I've used this as a cop. It's a great, simple, effective technique. And I'm just making a big circle and throwing him down. Here I am. I've stepped. He goes down. And we have this. Here's our bad guy. Still got a knife. I've got a knife. You can do this. Capture the limb. Come in and finish. I don't like some of the trickier ones where you're wrapping your leg and capturing it. It's too complicated. Remember, complication is the enemy of survival. And the simple, effective, powerful moves work. And you must become diverse and talented, but Complication and overcomplication is truly the enemy of survival. Well, I'm on a mission. I'm on a mission to get this information out to martial artists, to soldiers, to police officers. It's more of a reality approach to what really goes on. I've been teaching police officers since 1985 in different police academies in Texas, and it's an imperative. What you show them Tuesday afternoon might save their life Tuesday night. And I've never quite lost that feeling. And so I've just continued on after I retired by trying to teach this material. Hi, my name is W. Hawk Hockheim, and we are going to cover a rare subject, knife ground fighting. Knife ground fighting. Most people have never heard that term, but knife ground fighting, or what I like to call ground zero knife fighting, happens so very, very often in real life. Some knife fights begin on the ground. Two people fight, wrestle, and usually they trip because your human instinct is to stay off the ground, and mobility is an essential aspect of combat. So participants fall, as I've seen in work cases many, many times as a policeman. They'll pull out their knives on the ground, and the entire knife fight will occur on the ground. We have all kinds of terrain problems. We have curbs, we have sidewalks, brick walls, coffee tables. Anything could cause you to trip and fall, and at any time in a knife fight, you might have to do something down there, and of course the elements change. Some things remain the same, but some things don't. It is like, in some ways, what you would consider to be the ground fighting that you'll find in the martial arts, but it's different, it's quicker. There's a very sharp tool that's involved. Now, real people who land on the ground have guns, have pepper spray, have knives. It's a whole different aspect than referee tap-out submission fighting. And these things need to be taught to police officers to save their life, to citizens and soldiers. And in the history, military history, over and over again, we see accounts of soldiers in all the theaters of war who are in combat and wind up fighting on the ground. And so it's an aspect, an arena of combat that is sorely overlooked, that really needs to be addressed realistically. The topic that I'd like to discuss now is knife ground fighting. I call it ground zero knife fighting. And it's important because if you study the annals of military history combat, if you study the criminal justice system and how crimes are committed, the acts of criminals, and put that in with the chaos of combat, the terrain, tripping, falling, you will discover that all kinds of fighting, as well as knife fighting, can occur on the ground. And we're very accustomed to a certain kind of submission referee-based fighting, but in the no-holds-barred world, where people have pepper spray, guns, knives, it changes the complexion. And you must add this reality factor into what you're already practicing, as well as learn from the beginning right here. Now, we have Tom Barnhart stretched out here as the anatomical man, because I need to make an important point to you, that ground zero fighting is many different positions. You could throw the individual down, and you could be fighting from this position. He's this way, I'm here. You can be fighting over here. You could be fighting him here as you have landed it and thrown him down. You could be fighting him over here. You could be fighting in this thing. You could be fighting over here, one leg in, one leg out. Yes, one of these 10 or 11 positions is something you might be more used to. And yes, one of these 10 or 11 positions, just one possibility, might be in this particular position. You could be fighting him over here, and you can be fighting him over here. So you can see that real fighters are not just concerned with positioning themselves into the guard or the mount. That's just 2 of 10 or 11 possibilities. And let me tell you that some of those other 11 possibilities can be more combative in a street violent situation. And so I also want to say that ground zero knife fighting includes, as the way I like to teach it, knee-high fighting. You know, you trip, you should try to get up as quickly as possible. Sometimes you've been stabbed, you're down on one knee, and it also involves knee-high fighting versus a standing person, and also being prone versus a standing person. So if you're off your feet and you're fighting, this is ground zero type of tactics, you know. First thing, that little series I like to show comes to us from actual military combat. And we'll call it, I like to call it a kick the face series, because instrumental in diminishing the opponent is the ability to kick him in the face. And it is a side-by-side encounter, which is another one of the many possibilities that we can happen. So we'll turn this way right here. And the first little set I'd like to expose you to, and then for you to practice on, is our in the clutches of side by side, taken from real combat situations. Here we are. Now, one of the first thing I'd like to expose you to here is I would like to, as we do stand up, to try to attack this weapon-bearing limb. But perhaps my strength is not allowing me to do this. So I will raise my knee and pump. You see, this pumping action will help me defeat his strength and get a weapon-bearing limb attack that may diminish his grip and help me win this fight later. So I'm here. I raise the knee up, and there's my first shot. Next, I raise up, and I do as powerful a mule kick as possible. The first little title for the Kick the Face series, you know. Here's our, and this should be pretty effective. But as you can see in our potential follow-ups, it might not always be as effective as you wish. And then, I'm going to, since I've done this mule kick, now keep in mind, that's looking like this. It's a pretty gruesome kick. like here. Next thing I'm going to do is release, use a back kick, so to speak, to release the grip on that knife, which may be severely diminished, you know, after you mule kicked them in the face like that. And we'll end the scenario, this particular one, with an escape. I am going to do what I tend to call, for people's memory's sake, the curly shuffle. So that as an escape pattern, because if I show this technique to people and I tell them, okay, get up, this is typically what I see. They get up like this, exposing their back to the enemy. And like I always say, it ain't over till it's over. And that's not a safe way to get out of the situation. And so if I'm here, I pump, I kick, I release, I may strike again, and now I'm going to use this footwork to gain distance and space, never turning my back on the opponent as I begin to try to get up. Still controlling the weapon bearing, still assessing the situation right here. I might have to go to this next position, which I want to teach you, is just a ground trapping technique. I'm here, and I leap to here to protect myself against that weapon bearing limb, and then I've hopefully got my diminished person. Another subtlety in ground fighting, it's a knee strike, but it's not. You see, I have my knee in his solar plexus. I'm disrupting his wind. I'm creating this great discomfort. I may have my shin compressed across his chest, but see, that is essentially a knee strike right there, but it's pressure, see. And then I'll come in and try to finish the opponent. So we're here. I pump. I kick, I release, wound again, and escape and assess, kind of get back. I may choose now to say, whoa, I'm okay, and try to get away from the situation. Or I may have to, you know, go in and finish the bad guy by going back in and further stabbing him. Here's one side by side in this Kick the Face series that doesn't evolve the walk away escape, but rather you see an opportunity and you seize the moment by moving in. But it's still in this Kick the Face series. I love to call it that because it emphasizes that you're kicking the face and diminishing the fighter's ability. I'm here. I do the pump. I do this kick. And I'll do a back release. This is the one we just did. Now from here, I'm going to raise up this knee and capture this arm. You know, now I'm free. You know, I can put this hand to help me get up. If he is even halfway up in position here, I'm going to use another kick to bring him over. And now I've got him splayed out. I can come in, kill. The British SAS often have developed the commando kill through the ear. There's a clear pathway to the brain. But in actuality, there are some bone levels protecting the brain here. And it is not as clear a path as it is if you deliver the knife, say, through the eye or up the nose. You'll have to hammer that knife in at this point. I say that because a lot of old military manuals give you a false sense of success with some of these techniques. Let's just take a look at this one particular version here. We're here. I pump. I kick, release. Raise up this knee to contain that weapon-bearing limb. If he's partially up or otherwise, I kick over. See, I raise myself up, and then I finish him. Now, here's another version of this that you can do. We're here. I do the knee pump to get the diminished weapon-bearing limb. I'll do the face kick. Retract the leg. Raise up this knee. Some people are adept enough to get a knee strike in there, but I don't, always tell people to do that. And then, now look I captured this. He's still got a grip on me here. As I raise up, I'm going to push and raise over. And now I've got this situation, and this is all predicated, folks, on me kicking him in the head. Remember, that's a diminished fighter theory. And none of these things probably can fall into place for you, as you'll see when I show you the counter to this, without that head kick. If you want to win the fight, if you want to dominate the opponent, you have got to diminish his ability. I call it the diminished fighter theory. And the quick way to do that is to attack the head. And if we were in combat with someone who's suddenly beginning a fight and he's 110% enraged, he's full of energy, he's full of rage usually, and he's a very difficult opponent to defeat. You can't go in there and arm wrestle somebody like that. You can't hope that you can defeat somebody. Everybody's different. Everybody has different sizes, strengths, abilities. You have to cheat. Cheating should be a part of every aspect of every fighting training. That's how you beat the big guy. You cheat. And one of the ways to cheat is to immediately diminish the fighter, usually by a head strike. Sometimes it could be in knife fighting, you know, a cut on a muscle tendon. It could be a cut on a blood vein. But pretty much the head is the computer, and if you can splash the brains in some way, you've begun to diminish fighter. After this happens, suddenly he's functioning at 95%. Whack him again, cut him again, suddenly he might be at 80%. His instincts are slow, his reflexes are diminished, and then suddenly, you know, techniques of all types can occur. If you hit a guy hard enough, you could tie his sneaker laces together while he's so stunned. I mean, how's that for, you know, a possible scenario of understanding, you know, how you can diminish a fighter? Last tactics I showed you were to be done when the good guy, or you, is on the ground, on the side, when your knife is up, you know. That's what it's all about. This particular time, here are some things you can do. Very similar to the other one, when your knife side is captured down on the ground. And it's still in the Kick the Face series. We're here, you know, and I would like to try to injure this weapon. I may have to raise up and try to get a little action here, but I have to be careful about this knife. Here is our kick that hopefully changes his world. And I'm coming back, and if he's hopefully stunned, now I raise this up, my leg again, to try to capture or trap his weapon-bearing limb, and now I get the release. Still holding on for dear life. Maybe here I can attack this a little bit, raise this up, you know. I'm not going to release this, obviously, because, you know, that would mean I'd be freeing his hand like we did otherwise, so I don't do this kick. Instead, I just raise up and try to finish him this way. Let's take a look at this again. We're here. You know, I wound up in this position here. Here's the mule kick that I like to, you know, try to create the diminished fighter. From there, I'll raise up on this, get my release, use this to raise up, and then finish him this way. So that's a tactic that you can do when the good guy has his knife on the ground side of the side-by-side fight. Now, I'd like to show you a potential counter. If you're on the wrong end of this kick, this time I'll be knife down, but this is a simple martial art movement that just blocks across the top of your face. Let's just say he's pumped down on my knife, but you know, he's just only cut a portion of my forearm, you know. Here comes this leg, which now, as it's coming through, freeze. I do this to try to deflect the kick downward, you know. And here we are in this position. From here, I raise up, and I'm going to essentially do a ground round style kick that scoots me all the way over. Now, this particular time, he let go, which many people might. Worst case scenario, he's hung on. You know, now from here, I'm going to try to use his leg as a releasing technique. Just grab a hold of it again. If it doesn't seem like it's working at this point, now I'm going to exercise a couple of knee strikes to come around, work on that head to get the diminished fighter, pull out, which I'm getting some good cuts down on this side, and then finish the opponent. So, basically speaking, just go ahead, get up and roll off over the side here. I'll show you this independently so you can see it this way. I'm on the ground, and here comes this kick. And I'm blocking it down and getting my head out of the way as best I can. So now I've kind of got a little wedge on this leg right here. I rear up in my elbow, and then I'm doing a big round kick as far over as I can. From here, I'm going to try to use his leg, if he's still got me, to retract and escape, release that grab, and then continue to fight from there. So there is a side-by-side counter to the face kick series. History shows us that another common motion on the part of a side-by-side combatant is going to be that they will instinctively, even the untrained, begin to try to distance themselves from you and your knife. And this is most typically done by the use of his legs. And there's not too much you can do about it except try to destroy his legs as best you can. And some serious blood veins and tendons and muscles in there. And he's actually getting you into what we previously called the curly shuffle kind of escape. So if we're here on the ground, he brings his feet up to my pelvis, and typically, you know, we'll try to somewhat kick, but actually start to push me away so that he could get away from, you know, this blade. But instead, he's bringing his vitals up to, you know, my knife. And, you know, we showed some of these releasing techniques. This angle is almost a releasing technique like this, and you would hope that you have enough strength to come in and start attacking these legs. This is a very common response. After you've done this, you can even hang on a little bit. See, this is also, if in a reverse grip, you have all this cutting work that you can do on the forearm. In a saber grip, you might not. You might have to, you know, try to turn the saber end down and cut on these legs. But you can shave and work. The saber grip, you say, cut, so kick at me again. So here I am trying to work on disabling these legs. I will then sort of curly shuffle out. He may hang on. I might try to rip it out. And now I'm still in a better, more advantageous position. Even if he's hanging on to my hand at this point, you know, I can do my step over here. If he's hanging on to my hand, I can come over here. And now I can continue, you know, the fight from this position. It is very common for the opponent to kick at you, to push you away in side-by-side combat. So take advantage of those targets that are so vital being brought up closer to your knife. I've been teaching this next type of technique, standing and on the ground, for years now. And it's popped up in a major motion picture, so I've kind of given it that nickname of this picture. And this is when you're in the clutches of, you know, situation, and you're at ground zero. I can't, you know, Tom here is a power lifter, and he does, you know, over 300 pounds powerlifting. It's very difficult to defeat this guy's strength. Now, this is where he's building most of his strength, but out here, it's not a 300-pound lift, or even down here, it might not be a 300-pound lift. So if I have difficulty here, if I change it some, I might have a better chance. We don't want to stay here too long because there's other things that you can do, and they're dastardly. I mean, I could, if I'm thwarted here, I might be here. If I raise up to one knee, I could drop my knee right on the solar plexus. I mean, many different things that you could do right here. But I want to show you this knife movement here. If I can't stab him, I take the pommel of my knife and put it into my solar plexus, and I drop my entire body weight on him. You all have seen the movie. That's, you know, but we've been showing that. It's an old martial art technique. And I've been showing that, and this is the way you can defeat the person's strength. Now, we're in a knife-to-knife situation, and now we're going to do the counter I like to call Saving Private Ryan. He sees that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to drop my weight. He can't defeat the weight. He takes the pommel of his knife and puts it on his chest. Aha! So as I drop down on him, he stabs me. Now, if I've got a Crocodile Dundee knife about this long, and his is just short, a combat folder, then I can, you know, go somewhere down deep without him ever touching me. But if the knives are looking similar in length, then I have to worry about this here. So here would be killing Private Ryan, and then here is saving Private Ryan by placing his pommel on his chest and interrupting my downfall upon him. is another escape that you can use if you're topside for an empty hand versus knife that has involving that body momentum and drop. But you may realize that you've wound up in this position, or he may have fought and wound up in this position because he thinks he can fight down there, and this is a good place for him. He was halfway there, and he battles to get you into this mount-guard relationship. And I'll tell you right now, it's a bad neighborhood. Don't go there. Be tricky, be sneaky, be somewhere else than where half the country is training these little submission tricks, you know. Remember, you've got a knife. You've got a secret weapon. But at any rate, here we are, and I look down, and I see perhaps on his shirt, it says, Congress of American Knife Fight. Oh, my God, I don't want to be here fighting this guy. He might know what he's doing, you know. Or any tip, he's just strong, and you just realize, this isn't working. I've got to get out of here. And so what I'd like to try to do is take the pommel of this knife and get some kind of a potential puncture as I go through this motion. But so as not to hurt Tom, I'm going to turn the knife away. But from here, I will raise up and then flip forward and stab. Now, this is a very surprise move for him. Suddenly, the bad guy is here, and suddenly, he's gone. And then suddenly, a knife is seeking out his throat from back here. Now, the thing is that I hung on to this the entire time, rolled over. I'm not going to play, you know, small target trying to catch this weapon-bearing limb. I like to turn around, seek, and strike the throat. And this is a good, quick removal. You can also do this empty-hand escape in a ground zero type situation. Big flip forward, roll over, and then I'd be striking. But in this case, we're stabbing. We call that the Paladin dismount in our fighting system. Here's a situation where you have your combat folder. You can't get to it yet. He's battled to get you into this particular position. And this is a surprise for him if he's playing by a certain set of rules and you've got a big, ugly combat folder in your pocket you're trying to get to. And this is a particularly good one when he's got you and he's punching at me. And I'm trying to cover myself. I'm going to reach down, and as you can, down under here, just lift that leg, down under here is my combat folder that I'm pulling out and opening up. But we'll switch over to this, trainer for safety. And so here we are. Now I'm going to switch this to a reverse grip and start. Just keep punching at me and start with the cut right into the pelvis line, the artery, the tendon, all through here, and drive that blade all the way up, you know, and inside these particular punches. And so what I've got going here, inside, I've cut here, and I'm just driving this knife up. I call this, you know, the autopsy quick draw, because it's pretty close to that, you know. And ride it right up, catch the face, catch the throat, up inside the barrage of punches, which he might not get a chance to stop. From here, if I'm on this side, if I'm fighting for my life and I need to, this collarbone area, the clavicle area, if I drive this down and in, I can get into the top of his heart. I can get into his throat. I can stab up in here. So that what I want to do is cut and pull, you know, and then cut and then pull. And this is a good way to defeat on the street this type of predicament, the autopsy quick draw. I often mention the phrase that you should stop using your knife in a combat scenario after you've disarmed the person or thrown him down, that you should legally, morally, and ethically, you know, bail out of a combat scenario at any time. And that means, do you have the right to kill somebody? You know, it's not just acting like a macho tough guy, because if two men are fighting on a street corner, and one guy started the fight and the other fella is defending himself, and myself or any police officer in America pulls up in the middle of that fight, more than likely both those guys are going to jail. And that fella who was defending himself $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 later may or may not clear his name. After all that expense, the turmoil, the stigma, all this. And so I tell you that story because if you're using a knife, if you're fighting, it's a bad thing. Fighting is a bad thing. and get ready, because you're going to have hassles. You're going to have expenses, you know. And even if you're defending yourself in a completely justified situation, it's going to be tough for you because it's a negative experience, you know. And so you have to be justified to take the action that you're going to take. And we use the catchphrase, two catchphrases in the policing business: totality of circumstances, you know, and the reasonable and prudent observer, theoretically a judge, who is sitting back there and making an assessment of what you've done. And based upon the totality of circumstances, which you've got to articulate real well, you know, will decide if you're in trouble or not. If three men jump you in a dark night in an alleyway, one guy has a knife, and you attack with your knife that one person, you know, you may just wound him. You have two unarmed men continuing to attack you. Well, then you may use your knife on them. Well, why? Well, because it's dark, and there's three of them, and he only may be wounded, and I've got to stop these people. Those are perfectly justified reasons, you know, which you'll have a heck of a time, you know, trying to clear yourself with, but nonetheless, that is self-defense, you know. But all I can say is this, that we are the good guys, you know, and I want people to do the right thing. And when somebody dies, I want, you know, be on the good side of it, be on the right side of it. We don't know about justice, we don't know about right or wrong and the laws of something, but there's something to, you know, the karma of the universe. And I want you to be on the right side, if only for yourself, about any physical action that you take up against anybody.
TRS continues to add new titles to our arsenal of video programs that provide you with the most progressive fighting and self-defense solutions available. Our library of training videos is divided into 4 categories: prevention and avoidance, hand-to-hand combat, gun disarmament, tactical handgun training. Here's a preview of some of what Threat Response Solutions offers you. The first thing to know about life-threatening situations is how to avoid them. In Live Without Fear, former highly decorated U.S. Army Delta Force operative Tom Carter and security specialist Dave Chatelier will teach you how to avoid being a victim and will instill confidence in your ability to recognize danger before it's too late. Our monthly publication, The Red Zone, is the first and final word on aggressive defense. From home security tips to combat training, you'll find everything you need to know right here.
If I get in a little bit closer, bam, this is trapping range. This is the range, boom, where I can take this guy out of commission
This elite military fighting system is taught by Navy SEAL team trainer Paul Vunek, recognized as one of the world's top street fighters. It will teach you to easily take down trained boxers, karate black belt masters, and thugs twice your size. Knowing these upper-level fighting secrets can mean the difference between walking in fear and standing tall, knowing that you can quickly injure to degree anyone who messes with you or your loved ones. Most street fights are decided on the ground. Learn some of the world's most effective ground fighting secrets, including speed mastery, from ex-Iranian Secret Service agent and frontline soldier, Shahram Musavi. Developed from over 12 years of Navy SEAL training experience, Frank Cucci begins by teaching basic fighting skills and then progresses into combination weapons and mass attack defense techniques. Vladimir Vasilyev, former Russian super soldier, reveals Sistema, the centuries-old Russian martial art that was almost lost due to communist suppression. These closely guarded secrets were reserved by the Soviet regime exclusively for elite Spetsnaz soldiers, the most highly trained and feared special force operatives